Hi, everyone. My name is Dave Barton, and I've had the joy and the responsibility of being facilitator to Arts Orange County's Voices Veteran Storytelling Project for the past 4 years. This is the last video of the series that I'm involved with, and this is my only time in front of the camera. My father, Ken Barton, was in the United States Air Force from 1952 to 1955, and he was in Vietnam as an advisor during the time of the Tet Offensive. He filled out the Voices questionnaire, which all of the vets have filled out, while I was with the program. But he passed away in 2019 before I had the opportunity to help him flesh it out with more details. So this is an edited version of what he gave to me, and I'm going to pass that on to you. I just wish you were hearing his voice reading it instead of mine. I was 17 years old when my father died in 1950. I graduated from high school in 1951, barely with a C grade average. I had a low-paying job as an ambulance driver, first aid attendant with Craig Emergency Ambulance Company in Orange, California. At that time, males had to register with Selective Service, the draft board, at age 18, and I decided to enlist for 4 years in the Air Force rather than serve 2 years in the Army as a draftee. I had been a cadet in the Civil Air Patrol for a couple of years and thought I had some idea of what military life would be. Truth be told, I wanted to get away from home because I was selfish, immature, and I wanted to be free of my mother's control. In reality, I couldn't handle the adult responsibility and assist my mom in her hour of grief over losing my father. Physically, I was about 5'10" and weighed about 130 pounds. I was still a virgin, although I loved a girl from high school named Willa Glenn Bullard. As an aside, though, we were never physically intimate, but we remained friends for over 50 years through a correspondence with the knowledge of our spouses, of course, until she died about 3 years ago. I enlisted in the U.S. Air Force in Santa Ana, California on January 11th, 1952, and about a week later took my physical exam in Los Angeles with 40 or more guys in line going through the same exam, near nude, in our shorts. I passed, dressed, and was taken to an auditorium, sworn in, and then told to catch Greyhound bus on such and such a day in Santa Ana, which took us to the train station in LA, where we were loaded on day coaches and spent the next day or so traveling to Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. We were given a meal, marched to our barracks, a 2-story World War II temporary wooden building with space for about 100 bunks, single folding beds with thin mattresses on each floor, and learned to make our bunks with hospital folds over and over again until we could bounce a quarter on the blanket. After several hours of making our bunks, cleaning the barracks, which I don't remember being dirty, we were ordered to go to bed. After 3 hours of sleep, we were awakened by the lights being turned on and ordered to remake our bunks, shave, wash, and get dressed. I remember we weren't issued our GI clothing until after we were marched to the mess hall and had breakfast, after which we marched to the supply warehouse where we were measured for sizes and issued all of the clothes we'd be allowed to have. Coveralls, brogans, dress shoes, underwear, socks, etc. All of it dumped in a canvas barracks bag that we then carried while marching. From this time on, it was marching and more marching and learning how to salute, answer yes, sir to anyone that wasn't a recruit, and take classes in military conduct that would put you in the stockade if you disobeyed any of it. After 8 weeks, we graduated with the rank of Airman 3rd Class A3C, and I was sent to Kelly Air Force Base, also in San Antonio, to learn Russian. I flunked out at about the 3rd or 4th week, was reclassified, and sent to the U.S. Army MPRTC, Military Police Replacement Training Center, for 8 weeks of U.S. Air Force Air Police training, which remained my primary assignment for the remainder of my enlistment. After graduation from MPRTC, I was assigned to USAF Security Service, issued a top secret clearance, and stationed on Kelly Air Force Base for about a year until I was transferred to Far East Air Force's Shiroi Air Force Base on Honshu Island, Japan, as an air policeman, later renamed Security Air Police. This entailed providing security of a classified installation. I was never in combat while in the Air Force. Japan was an exotic, different environment. We learned Pidgin Japanese, which consisted of basic questions of where, how much, what was the telephone, where's the bathroom, etc. Some, including myself, however, showed respect by learning how to bow and speak some actual Japanese. I like the Japanese people for the most part. It's important to remember we were occupiers of a once hostile country, and that World War II had been over for only about 6 years. Additionally, the US was now involved in the Korean conflict war, and Japan was a stopover for troops en route to Korea. Most Japanese were very courteous, primarily because most of the population lived crowded / close to each other, and conflict between neighbors was lessened by exercising and showing courtesy. Except when getting on or off their very efficient 90 to 100 mile per hour passenger trains. After 2 years in Japan, I was transferred to Strategic Air Command at Carswell Air Force Base, Fort Worth, Texas, where I remained until discharged in 1955, providing security for the base and B-36 bombers. The only memorable thing I did there was make my very first arrest. A thief had broken into a friend's locker, and I discovered him in the act. He did not resist, and I marched him to the Air Police headquarters. Later, I was the sole witness at his court-martial, where he was sentenced to 6 months in the base stockade and given a dishonorable discharge. I was discharged from active duty on January 11th, 1955, and returned to my mother's residence in Orange, California. I was in a combat area, but never in combat, in the city of Phan Thiet, Binh Thanh Province, South Vietnam during the Vietnam War as a police advisor to the Vietnamese National Police. I provided advice and logistical support to my counterpart, accompanying him in a detachment of about 30 or so field force police on several patrols outside the city of Phan Thiet. We never contacted the Viet Cong during any of those patrols. Since the police had to advise the local province chief, a colonel in the Army of Vietnam, I'm sure Viet Cong spies warned any VC in the patrol area of our coming well in advance. The only time I was in anything approaching combat was during a visit to a fellow advisor in Dalat, which became a combat zone during the Tet Offensive. While I was there, the VC launched a South Country-wide assault, and 2 American civilian nurses became stranded and unable to leave their isolated quarters. We drove to their residence, loaded up their personal effects, and transported them to a safe location where they were evacuated. My advisor friend and I forted up at U.S. Army BOQ, Bachelor Officers Quarters. We were posted on an outside second floor balcony armed with rifles and a grenade launcher. My advisor friend saw troops approaching us on a lighted road and said, "Hey, oh, here they come," and he fired his grenade launcher at them. Now, I sprayed the same area with M2 carbine fire using a couple of 30-round magazines. But truthfully, I never saw the enemy. And when we checked the area in daylight, found no evidence they had even been there. It was common for the VC to carry away their killed and wounded, so the fact we found no evidence of them having been on the road was of scant importance. My fellow advisor was a retired U.S. Army colonel in Special Forces and a combat veteran from World War II. So I believed him when he said the enemy was out there, even though I didn't see them. In Vietnam, I met an Army first lieutenant who was one of the good guys and was killed by the VC. He died because some medic doctor didn't count the exit versus entry bullet holes. He bled to death after getting to the hospital. In the end, I should have stayed home with my dear wife and children rather than going off on an adventure in Vietnam. That is something I can never make up. I got to see and experience other countries and cultures that as a common middle-class civilian, I would never have been able to. I gained the conviction of how fortunate I am as an American that my country is the best of them all. On the Air Force's dime, I got to go to Spain, Gibraltar, French North Africa, Japan, Vietnam, and points in between. I met and I worked with more and different individuals than most people ever could associate with unless they'd been in the service. Most of the time, we didn't even have a choice of whether we wanted to associate with them or not, but we worked it out.